I mentioned recently that Pluto was more like a comet than being a terrestrial planet. That's because Pluto, it's so far out, so cold out there, Pluto actually has a lot of icy component. And then we talked about the Kuiper Belt, and we call things that are in the Kuiper Belt objects, or KBOs. So those things make great comets. So what a comet is rocky, icy object. And if they're too close to the sun, it's not going to be stay ice. So the Kuiper Belt objects in the Oort cloud is material that was kind of flung out there by the solar wind when the sun turned on. And there are two dates that I want you to know, and one of the dates is the beginning of our solar system, and that was 4.6 billion years ago. So comets then those materials out there in the Kuiper Belt and even the Oort cloud can get a nudge and kind of move it from where it's orbiting the sun way far out to send it on a different trajectory towards the sun. Now that could be a planet that could make that kind of nudge happen. Actually, it could be another star which can make that nudge happen, which is kind of interesting. So it changes its direction. Instead of kind of being nice and icy out there away from the sun, it comes then closer to the sun. And as it does, all those ices, or some of the ices, begin to fizz. Okay, so we kind of actually have a few things going. We have, here is kind of the anatomy of a comet. You see a tail. Actually, there's two tails. There is the straight ion tail, and there's kind of a curved dust tail that you may or may not see. Okay, here I see a straight ion tail, and maybe this is the curved dust tail. And this is actually a photo, and the other one is a figure. But in the heart of this right here, we see kind of surrounded by this gas, as we call the coma, is the nugget that is a comet. You can kind of see this invisible kind of hydrogen envelope here. They're very pretty. So the thing is this will happen, this kind of vaporization of the comet when it gets closer to the sun. And as it gets closer and closer to the sun, that vaporization process is enhanced. And oftentimes, if the comet's lucky, it will make a successful circle around the sun and go back out into the outer reaches of the solar system where it's cooler. And so you kind of see that decrease in this sort of ionization, so the tails will get less. So here on Earth then, what happens is we can see a streak, well, yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of exaggerating streak. You oftentimes have to use a telescope. Sometimes it's naked eye, but you'll see a streak across the sky that actually moves kind of night after night against the background stars. And it may be getting longer if it's getting closer to the sun, or shorter if it's getting farther from the sun. Okay, so that is a comet. Here we have a comet kind of caught in action. We talked about terms perihelion, and I've actually heard that term associated with comets as a comet, make sure I'm going this right, yeah, as a comet orbits the sun, when it's closest we call that at perihelion, and actually you can kind of see this vaporization being the greatest at perihelion. Another thing, do you notice, I really like this figure, is that in all of the cases, even though kind of this line right here is showing you how the sun is orbiting, how the comet is orbiting the sun, you can see that the tail is always directed away from the sun. So it's not in the direction of movement, but the tail is away from the sun. Remember, two tails. So that actually is due to something we talked about, solar wind, kind of blowing that tail away from it. So that's kind of cool. Very neat. I think I've got to kind of wrap up to show a few images of some comets. This is Comet Ison, and they're named after who finds them, who discovers the comet. Now, I only recently was told this, that there is actually software out there that looks at the nighttime sky and looks for things like comets, and then they kind of have they'll name the software and give it a designation. So I'm not sure Ison might be one of them, but it's a beautiful comet. Here we have Comet McNaught, and you see how they're all a little bit different. So we have kind of a coma here, and not much of a coma here, and we have just a barely tail here, and we have kind of, you can generally see the two tails there. So, oh, and this is Comet Lovejoy.